Okay. Should I get started?
Yeah.
All right. Thanks everyone for coming. Welcome to the wild frontier of AI art. AI art is kind of a hot topic right now. Everyone's talking about it. Okay.
Yeah.
Everyone's talking about it.
No, that was a louder thumbs up.
Okay. And as much as people are talking about it, not many people know what it is. What is this elusive thing called AI? There's many facets to it, but what pulled me in initially was its ability to create art. And its unique methodology of how it makes art, how images are generated, how we use words and our language to describe something that we have in our minds. So I got started in 2021, and back then it was an AI model called VQGAN. This is very techy, and I apologize if it doesn't make any sense, but essentially there are these models that you have that AI, people have created these models that are comprised over millions of images. Just all the images out there, basically. So they're able to identify different objects, and maybe a lamp or a dog or a tree. So initially, it was very limited as to the quality, the coherence. What you're typing in is not exactly what you're going to get, which was, in my mind, exciting because I'm an experimental artist, and it's part of my process to try things and get something you're not expecting. So you can see these early renditions are very abstract, and this little alien on the bottom left was one of my first NFTs, and it was about this alien race that comes to the Earth because they don't have color on their planet, so they want to get their portraits done on planet Earth and in full spectrum color. So that was kind of in conjunction to my explorations. I was exploring the NFT world.
What is NFT?
Non-fungible tokens, which is a whole other talk in and of itself that would take another couple hours. But essentially, they're digital artworks that are being sold and monetized and collected, much like people would collect work in a gallery, but they're digital. So I continued my studies into 2022, where I was using an AI model called Disco Diffusion, which gave us a little bit more coherence and a little bit more quality and more resolution, more pixels, basically. And this other model called PyTTI, which is Python text to image. And you can create some really wild and oftentimes psychedelic type of artwork, which is very particular to my special kind of artwork, what I do. But people were using it for all kinds of different generations. Fast forward to 2023, we have Stable Diffusion with this woman with the butterflies, and this is where things really started coming together as far as realism and and the quality that you're able to produce. So I think this was a major stepping stone for AI artists in general, to really get what was in their head and not just some amorphous shapes that somewhat recognized, somewhat was like reminiscent of what they were thinking of. And now in 2024, we have a lot more amazing, almost photographic quality of these incredible surrealistic landscapes, or whatever your imagination is taking you, you can make that happen with AI. And throughout this journey, I think it's important to recognize that it hasn't been an easy road for AI artists. It's been an uphill battle. And there's people on one side of the spectrum that are like, this is not real art. This is copying, we're ripping off other artists. There's a lot of aggression from these traditional classic artists. Whereas on the other hand, these AI artists are finding AI to be a tool and almost like a brush for a new type of brush or artistic tool in the use of creating art. And I'm a firm believer that it's not merely mimicking other types of art. It's about using these tools that are so special and that enable us to really create whatever we're dreaming about. So, because I have a limited amount of time, I'm going to keep going. And this is kind of like, how does this all work? It's pretty simple if you look at the pictures, really. It's very complex, and I have to admit I don't fully understand exactly how it works, because this is very, very sciencey. You know, it runs on a Python background, which is a programming language. But essentially what it's doing is it's taking its database of all these images and using the user to give it an input. So you're telling it, okay, I want this cat in a field with a top hat, for instance. And then it's kind of generating noise on top of that and refining. So it goes through all these steps of refining, where it's obliterating the image and then slowly focusing and refining. Almost like, here's an example. If you're looking up at the sky and you see a grouping of clouds, and you're like, oh, okay, there's just like all these pretty clouds, and then you start to look closer and you're like, oh, well, maybe there's an animal in there. I'm starting to see there's like some kind of animal shape, and then you look even closer, you're staring at it longer, and then you start to see a giraffe, for instance. And then the more you look at it, the more you're starting to pull out these little details of the shading, of the texture, and then you're getting, in your mind, a clearer version of this animal that is kind of in your imagination. But essentially that's what AI models and diffusion models are doing. They're slowly refining from something completely abstract and reanalyzing and going through that process hundreds of times, and the more it goes through that cycle, it refines it more and more until you have a coherent image. In a nutshell. Of course, there's a lot of other details, but that's what it's doing. So how does it work? It's about text to image is the general utilization of this tool, and prompt wizardry, as I call it, but most people call it prompt engineering, which is basically describing your scene. And there's a certain formula that people have created to be able to create these images. So starting from something very simple, a sky full of clouds, this is what we get. Then if you go into more detail, it's it's almost like you're describing to somebody a scene of like, I was out in this area, and the more you describe, the better picture it paints. So sky full of clouds over an Arizona desert returns this image. And then a lot of people are using artists as references, which is very controversial. But it's not copying the art piece itself. It's taking hundreds of images and almost like a montage of a stylistic version. So this is a surreal painting by Salvador Dali, and you can see his stylistic influences in the landscape. And then you can go even further and say a stormy sky full of cumulus clouds over Arizona desert, a surreal painting by Salvador Dali, animal shapes in clouds, sunset, intricate details, green and purple. So, it's a lot of trial and error, but the more you describe the scene, the more you're developing your artwork. And sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. And that's part of the fun, because you can sit there for hours just changing words and descriptors. They call them modifiers in this prompting language, where you're describing something like a magnificent or a detailed or a vibrant. You describe the colors. So it's a rabbit hole that you can go down and barely come back out of. The other approach would be image to image, and this is in tandem with prompting, but you can start with your own image. So say you had a sketch that you did, a photograph, and these are my own photographs, except for this cat eye. I'm also an avid mushroom forager, so you'll see a lot of mushrooms in my work. But these are photos I took out in the field foraging, and then I put them into this AI software and elaborated on it with modifiers and descriptors and psychedelic terminology and what have you to create these images on the side. And a lot of people can benefit from this, if they're artists and they want to turn a sketch into something more like a conceptual sketch into a real visual reference of what's, something that they sketched for like a couple minutes. They can turn it into something even more substantial. So now I'm going to go into a couple of my own favorite projects that I've worked on. This one is called Majestic Mycology, and I wanted to shout out to Make It Rad. That's my reminder up there, who is one of my good friends in the art world, former faculty and teacher of motion graphics, Brad Tucker. And he helped me learn how this specific AI model works called StyleGAN. And what we did was we took 1,829 images of mushrooms and trained our own model. So basically all these models are very generic. They have like a broad knowledge of all types of things like birds and trees, but you can refine it and make it a lot more specific. So we took all these images and trained our own mushroom model, and then we're able to create a very stylized version of these mushrooms that we threw back into another AI modality called StyleGAN, which enables you to create these incredible animations that, being an animator myself, I've never been able to replicate with my traditional software. So that's something that excited me a lot about this world, is that we're creating new types and new representations of form and of movement. And I can show you guys this animation. And the way this works is it generates thousands of images of what it interprets your image to be, called fakes. And then you pick out which frames you like, and you interpolate, basically, is a fancy way of saying morphing. You morph one frame to the other, to the next one, to the following one. And yeah, like I said, I'm a traditional motion graphics animator. There's no way I would be able to animate this with my traditional tools. So it's pretty incredible. Just the way the colors change and the shapes form together.
How freeing.
Yeah. It's definitely nice to take a step away from your traditional tools. And this kind of world is just evolving and permutating. So it's still changing and evolving as we speak. This is another NFT project that I worked on, my first sold out collection of 50 royal beasts, animals that were considered royalty. And I had a lot of fun with this one. I love animals, and I just thought it was a really fun way to share my love of animals in a very unique way. And I have to say, I feel like Adobe stole my concept, because I don't know if you guys have been seeing this, but they've been posting this ad with a rhinoceros with a crown on it. And I'm pretty sure they saw this collection and they're like, that's pretty good. Anyways, I digress. This is an example of a collection of stills. So, and this was one of my first experiences with Stable Diffusion, which is the current AI model that everybody's using. It's very powerful, it's very capable, and it's very good at interpreting what's in your mind and what's on your keyboard, I guess. So, how much time do I have? Okay, 10 minutes. Anybody who is interested in learning some of these tools, there's so many tools out there right now. But what I would suggest is, if you're interested in trying AI generation for art or just for fun, there's a lot of apps out there that can do this very easily. That's a great starting point. Dream Studio is another one that is made by the makers, the people that created Stable Diffusion. They make this online portal called Dream Studio, and I think they give you some free credits. You have to buy some, but they're really reasonable, and you can just generate on the fly. You just start typing, and poof, there comes your art. Now, if you're into getting more in depth, Google Colab is great. You can use their virtual GPUs to generate visuals. If you don't have a really powerful machine at home and you don't want to install all the software, it's easy to use. Comfy UI is another one that is node-based. Now, I'm probably speaking a different language to all you guys, but this is the tech side. Automatic 1111 is something you can install locally if you want to generate with your own machine all these AI. It's very memory and GPU intensive, so you need a good machine to do it. But I would highly recommend this guy, pharmapsychotic.com/tools.html. He has a list. This is the cheat, the AI cheat of all of the tools that you will ever see out there for AI. All the good ones, at least. It's an amazing compilation. He's an amazing artist. And yeah, that's a great place to start. Or you can talk to me after the talk. It's hard to talk about all this in half an hour because I've spent hours and hours in this, and it's also a very complex topic. So I hope that this helps you guys understand a little bit more about AI art. And now I will give a little bit of a demo of some of the creations that I've made. A lot of it, I actually forgot to mention, a lot of it is actually animated content because I do, part of my art form is doing stage visuals. So I do big LED walls, projection mapping, and that was my motivation for getting into this, is to create animations that could be played on stages alongside musicians or DJs. So yeah, here's some more of my work. This was my very humble beginnings. This is one of my first animations, so you can kind of see the progression of how things started out maybe like 3 years ago. This was a Taco Bell space station. Yeah, it's barely there, but yeah. And this gets into some more of the sacred geometry, kind of more fractal type environments. This is another one using StyleGAN and impossible shapes. Part of this
This is wonderful.
series I call Portals.
It's just wonderful.
Of course, more mushrooms.
Can you tell us where each of these might be used?
Yeah,
If they're using them at dances,
yeah. I mean,
or if they're just creating and they're coming.
primarily for festivals and large stages where they have big LED walls behind the DJ, or projection mapped onto large surfaces. And when I use these, I have them in a deck with a controller, so I actually perform the visuals alongside the DJ or the band itself. So, you know, when they hit like a note, then I trigger something. Yeah, it's a whole different experience when there's music added to it.
And are these animated things done just with verbal prompts again?
Yes.
So you say flying through a
Not
arch.
necessarily, and this is kind of what I was talking about earlier, where it's constantly refining. So you have this virtual camera that's pushing forward the image forward. You have like an equation that's saying scale this up, basically, and it's finding all this new detail in the new parts that it's coming up with. So it's constantly discovering itself over and over and over again.
So you're a mathematician too then? A little bit?
I'm just a nerd.
You guys are right?
Yeah, I mean, you definitely need some kind of math to do some of these animations, especially when you're adding some curves to, you're giving it basically an equation of where the camera's going. So it's like there's an X and a Y and a Z, and you're kind of plotting points in 3D space of where the camera should go. And after a certain amount of frames, it turns this way. After a certain amount of frames, you know, it spins.
Experience in video games must have helped.
No, that's just a side hobby.
What was the question?
Experience in video games being helpful.
Well, because you're constantly navigating.
Yeah, it is similar to that. The ability to to navigate 3D space.
That's what
Yeah.
While this is showing, can you talk a little bit about your piece that you have in this
Yes.
show?
So that's actually one of the most exciting parts of in AI history, in my opinion, is what I'm using in the other room, which is very new, and it's the ability to generate AI in real time. When I started some of these animations, even just still frames would take hours. Animations would take days. It's frame by frame, and the more coherent, the more detail you want in the image, the longer it takes. So what I'm using in the other room is a webcam to take video capture of whoever's in front of it and translating that into AI using a prompt. And I'm able to do that at a very fast speed using this newest technology, 10 frames per second, which doesn't sound like a lot, but in this world, it's something very special. And opens up doors to a lot of new opportunities to use it as an installation device and an interactive tool. It's incredible because not only can you see it in real time, you can type it in real time. So instead of having to wait for the AI to give you back the image and see if it works, see what happened, as you're typing, you can see the changes happening on the fly, which is incredible. It's just, it's light years beyond what I started doing in 2021. So it's a wild time for technology, and I think it's more than technology, though. I can't reemphasize this enough that it's a tool for creation and imagination, and I think a lot of people are using it that don't have traditional art skills, and I think that's really powerful. My girlfriend specifically is a tutor, and she's trying to come up with these advanced metaphors for her students and to illustrate how certain things affect the brain in a certain way. And she's able to use AI to create this imagery. Instead of searching Google, she can create exactly the metaphor that she wants using this technology. So I've had a lot of other artists in my online network say it's helped them through depression. A lot of people that actually have physical ailments that are not able to do the artwork that they used to be able to do, that they're able to do this from their laptop, and for that to be a really powerful healing device, which is kind of amazing.
So what would be some text prompts that you use to create this?
Oh wow. Yeah, I think this one was some kind of crystal cavern, multicolored crystal cavern in a space nebula, maybe, something along those lines. But you know, also a lot of AI artists are not willing to reveal their
Well,
prompts,
that's part of that.
Yeah.
which I can't even remember my prompt, to be honest. But yeah, and that's another thing with the installation in there is that alongside the creation in real time, that you're seeing yourself become the AI, I'm showing you the prompt that you can see exactly what is being created by which words.
Do you have trouble projecting your work then? You mentioned before the hippopotamus with the crown.
Yeah, I was just joking a bit, but couldn't help but find the similarities. It's tough, you know, and I think that's a big battle with digital art, but that's also where NFT art came in a strong way, which was tokenizing artwork and having limited editions. Some of them, a lot of these were one-of-ones, like this one specifically was the only one out there. Some other ones, people do editions. It's like the art world where, you know, you you could have prints of your art,
Yeah.
but everybody wants the original. And honestly, with AI art, it's pretty tough to replicate some of these things. I mean, you could see the process that I went through to get to this point is pretty intensive. And I challenge anybody to try and recreate this. But there's ways to do it. There's reverse engineering AI software where you can load in an image and it tells you the prompt. So, I'm all for open source and sharing. It just depends what.
It's the creative process.
It's the creative process, and it's similar to like any kind of photography or paintings, and somebody comes up with this hot new style, and then there's a bunch of other knockoffs. But if you establish yourself as an artist, I think people will recognize that maybe you did it first.
Or better than it.
Yes.
If you put a specific prompt in and you run it multiple times, does it come up with different things each time? Or?
Yeah, and a lot of apps don't really do that, but when you get into some of the deeper notebooks with Google Colab, or if you're running out of Automatic 1111, you can have a thing called a seed. You can do it random seeds, so it's basically generating random noise. And you could keep it the same seed if you want to have the same framework and know what the words are doing differently, or you can change the seed completely.
I'm Jennifer. I curated the exhibit. I want to make sure that we have time for everybody to look at everything. So let's have one more question,
Great.
and then Amun will be at his piece in the other room if you have more questions.
Yeah, great.
I have a question if I can speak to the copyright questions that people have.
Sure.
Because-
He has an answer.
What's that?
You have an answer.
I do have an answer. Because the federal copyright folks have set a precedent on that, because I've had to do some research with my own work on that. So they consider AI art fair use, because it's not copying other artists exactly, it's aggregating so much and mashing it up into something new. Also, if like in my work, I take everything into Photoshop and my own hand is in most of it. So even if you have an AI image, if you put your own hand into it and alter it, then you can put your own copyright on it. So anything you do is not copyrightable if you don't have your own hand in it, but at the same time, it's not transgressing into anybody else's copyright. Does that make sense?
When you say your own hand in it, what does that mean?
What's that?
When you say your own hand in it,
Altering it. So let's say I take
Okay.
a piece of my AI in
Understood.
Photoshop, I paint over it and change it, then that's my own hand. I can't work it.
Any other last question? One more. If anybody.
What kind of computer, like in terms of, you said your laptop, that must be like an advanced gaming laptop?
It's a gaming laptop.
Okay, can handle all
It's really the graphics processor
Yeah.
that takes the biggest load. And this is like a mid-priced gaming laptop. Of course, I have my tower that has like a beefy graphics processor. But like I said, you don't necessarily need that. The Google Colab allows you to buy credit on their virtual machines, which is great. And a lot of these apps or pay-per-use tools allow you to use their machines, which generally is faster than any of our machines, any of mine. Yeah. But the deeper you go in, the more you want to do it yourself and not have to pay per use.
Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.